Hi friends, it's Karen Chraska, one of the pastors at Treach, and I'm really excited to come and share a little bit with you today. We've been asked to talk about the topic of vulnerability. It's the theme of our sermon series for the month of September called Unshallow. And we got so excited as a worship team talking about what that means. All of us have relationships that go about this deep. How you doing? How's the weather? The kids doing well in school? Ooh, nice yard. But to have relationships that go deeper, we have to allow ourselves to go deeper and to put ourselves out there. So it's my privilege to just talk to you a little bit about vulnerability and kind of what that means to me. Well, the first thing I always do is just kind of look up the word vulnerable. It means susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. A person in need of special care or support. Well, I don't know about you, but those kind of qualities, someone who sets themselves up for attack or harm or is kind of needy, it kind of goes against our cultural norms. We don't want to hold ourselves up as someone who's vulnerable. We want to be strong and in control and having the answers. So when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with other people, wow, we have to kind of put ourselves out there and realize that conversations and relationships might kind of set us up for some type of ridicule or embarrassment. I've been thinking about a funeral that I just did a couple of days ago. It was a wonderful service of worship celebrating the life of a young person in our church that lost their battle with a drug addiction. And the family, instead of hiding that their beloved son had a drug addiction, has come forward in just incredible ways, sharing their story of grief and triumph and ultimately loss to this addiction. They've made themselves vulnerable because it's easy to kind of gloss over the things that are hard and uncomfortable. But they've named this head on. They've started a scholarship in their son's memory to the university where he attended. They're being vulnerable with their brokenness and their pain. And I think that's something to be admired. You know, Jesus made himself vulnerable as well. When Lazarus died in the book of John, it says Jesus wept. Here is a leader, a teacher, ultimately Messiah, who breaks down and cries because of the death of his friend. Now, does that sound like a strong leader? It sounds like a leader that made themselves vulnerable. Jesus also washed feet, kind of put himself out there and did lowly tasks, made himself vulnerable, and really didn't fit the pattern of a leader, of a king. Jesus was vulnerable. You know, I'm going to tell you a little funny story about my youngest daughter. She wanted to be signed up for athletics, and she's really not ever done athletics. So in middle school, she's all signed up, and she came home the first day of school and said, I can't just run. I have to pick another sport, and I have to try out. And so volleyball tryouts are tomorrow. And Dan and I both kind of said, honey, you've never held a volleyball. You've never played volleyball. My oldest daughter said, she wants to do volleyball? She's awfully flimsy. So we tried to tell Chloe, honey, don't get your feelings hurt. Don't get your feelings hurt if you don't make a team because, you know, you've really never done this. She made herself really vulnerable and said, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I really don't have anything to lose. So sure enough, we took her to school early. She did the practice and the audition, and she didn't make a team. So for one afternoon after school, when she found out the results, she was pretty blue. But we told her, you know what? You made yourself vulnerable. You tried. Obviously, you're not gifted in that. Maybe you'll grow in that area. But I've been struck by how naive she was in that knowing there's kids that are really talented and athletic in a sport to go ahead and try out. What's the worst thing that can happen? Would I have done that as an adult, kind of tried out for something that I didn't have the faintest clue how to do. I think Jesus calls us to step out. I think Jesus calls us to put ourselves in a position of vulnerability. I went to a workshop recently in August, and the keynote speaker said, instead of asking yourself what's the worst thing that can happen, ask yourself what's the best thing that can happen. So when we're trying to be vulnerable and grow deeper in relationship, the worst thing that can happen is we could be made fun of, or people could judge us. The best thing that could happen is we might be able to relate to someone that's in the very same circumstance, has gone through that situation, or might be about to go through that situation, and it can cause us to have a much deeper, meaningful relationship other than, I hope you have a great day and hope you're doing well. So my challenge to you, to me, is to use Jesus as an example of a leader who invites us to put ourselves out there, to share in big ways, to not be embarrassed of things that the world might not hold in high regard. I pray that throughout this month and in worship that you would grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus Christ and others by becoming more vulnerable.